schoolhouse, which was given to us by Anson Wagner to his father back in 1953, along with 7 other pictures. Dan Robinson found out we get those refurbished, went through the Greater Hudson Heritage Network. And you read about these things, it says, you know, Jane Loomis Gould, is that right?
Yeah.
Is one who painted this picture. And I've only been here about 12 years now, so I have no idea who she is. And we always brag about it. And so we're getting ready to do this presentation. Elaine Hilton's going to talk about the school. Gary Albright, the refurbisher, is going to talk about how he lived the process. And Ken walks up and says, I was a neighbor of Jane's, and I'm writing a book about her. Would you want me to say something? Now, I'm a member of Mensa, and I picked this up right away. Like, this is a good idea. And so then he offered to do a presentation at our sometime during the year. This is our annual meeting, and so we thought we would find time to do it. I looked at the crowd here. There's probably more people here who know Ken than know me. So it's we appreciate everybody from Naples coming here. We're honored to have you. And those of us also here from Middlesex.
Thank you for all for coming to this. Not a perfect day for leaving the house, but this project has gone on for 2 years. I thought I was writing a 4-page paper on Jane Loomis because she was my neighbor, and I saw the stone church. I thought I'll write something up on her for the Naples Historical Society, so we have something about her. And I was the only guy left in town who actually met her, you know. So I started, and this was a series of rabbit holes. I mean, this is 2 years later, where the story got more and more interesting. And because nobody knew anything, it took a lot of research to find things. But it was kind of amazing what I did find. So I'm glad to write this because 20 years from now, nobody will know anything about her personally, and this will be it. But you know, when I write these things today, and Daryl Abraham is with us today, he's an artist in Naples, and I was saying somebody should write this story about Daryl Abraham. And it's a perfect analogy because Jane Loomis could have be here, sit in the room, and she was one of those quiet, stand back types. She wouldn't have said a word about her ability. She wouldn't never. In fact, when I was doing research and I found her will, which you can get, you know, at the surrogate courthouse. After all was said and done, she never mentioned one of her hundreds of paintings that she had done. It was just like she had never painted, you know. So some people say, well, why did you do this on Jane? I said, had Jane not been a painter, I never would have done this. She would have just been like many people who come, live in a community, die, you know, buried up at Ruth Ridge, and we don't know their story, except maybe their family knows their story. But because she was a painter, and because I have a background in the arts, I was really interested, and I thought the story was worth being told. So, I'm going to try to do something. Oh, uh-oh.
I don't know how to do that either.
I don't know.
I gotta do my face.
Oh, good.
So, you need my face.
I'm going to try to do something. I have a slideshow for her work, and I will try to interweave in that her life story. All this in 20 minutes. So we'll see how it all goes. But before we even start with Jane, this little girl here, Grace Bailey, was Jane's mother. And she was born in 1901 in Cardiff, New York. Now Cardiff, New York is below Syracuse. And do you remember the Cardiff Giant? That's where it was, right in that town. The biggest anthropological hoax ever perpetuated was right there in Cardiff. So she was born there in 1901, and she was raised there. She was the 11th child on a farm. Her father was named Monroe, and her mother was named Bertha, and they lived on a farm. And had she not moved to Syracuse and married somebody locally, this whole book would never have been written, because her story would have just been a different story. But she moved to Syracuse in 1920, which most small town people did, especially from Cardiff, and was working there, was working next door to a guy named Addison, and they got together, and boom, a year later, or 9 months later, she had a set of twins. So So she went her whole life, raised right here. This is the Lafayette School building. This is her right there. They're all leaving baskets in that class. Education hasn't changed at all. So, Lafayette School is right there on the right, where the one-room schoolhouse. And then this is kind of an interesting picture. This was, to find this picture was amazing. On the right is Jane, and on the left is Jane, her 3 sisters, and her sister-in-law at a wedding. Jane was she was 29 when this picture was taken. I'm sorry, Grace was 29 when this picture was taken. She had already had her twins, and she was working at the Allen Tool Company in Syracuse, which was a really progressive tool and die shop. During the war years, they did really well. So, she had these 2 kids. As I said, she was one of 11 children. There was no way her parents were going to take care of a set of twins. The father married a month later somebody else, so obviously he had something else in mind, and he was not interested. So these kids had 3 sets of names. I first found them under the name of the father, Addison. Then I found them under the name Bailey, which was her parents' name, and then she became a Loomis. So then she became Gould. So she had 4 names over her at the time. But she came out of the Onondaga orphanage. She and her sister were both there. The Warrens probably, we think, knew somebody in Otisco, New York, where she was born, who knew that they were looking for a child and got a hold of them. And so she was adopted by Glenn and Bertha in October 1930. They brought her home, and they were terrific. There's stories about Glenn. Loomis was kind of a stern, kind of tough guy, but he wanted a child and he raised his child because Glenn was adopted as well. In fact, this whole family is nothing but adoptees, right, as you'll see it go through. So they supported her. And when she used to go to church at the Methodist church in Naples, right across the street from where she lived, church services back then were a lot longer than they are today, And so her parents used to give her art supplies. And she would sit in the pew doing drawings and artwork while the minister kept going. And that started the whole thing off. And so she went through high school. And she was that kind of girl. She was on the honor society, played in the band, played in the orchestra, played some sports. But when you have a lineup of her in a group, she's always in the back. She's never up front. She was very quiet back. Oops, uh-oh.
And I need my face again, probably.
I hope you enjoyed that presentation. What am I going to do?
I got to put my face on here again.
Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. All right. So anyway,
Take a picture of yourself.
this picture here is kind of interesting because it shows Jane standing in the back, tall girl in the back, with 14 people from Naples, all names that people from Naples would recognize. They're all the old names of Naples. And this picture just came out of nowhere. Blanche found it someplace, and that's what happened here. We started with nothing. We had nothing when we started, and then we get things like this. So, like every talented kid in school, she became the artist for the yearbook. And she did all these illustrations, the battleship of the right to school. And so she was just moving along. Now, you look at these and go, well, so what? Well, so I did some research. I looked at the year after and the year before, and the illustrations were terrible. And then, bam, she comes along and does these beautiful illustrations. But this is what changed her life. When she was a junior in high school, she painted this 40 by 60 painting. Her art teacher made sure she had all the supplies that she needed. This is a godsend for us to make because it shows the whole town, all who own things. And she did this as she was only a junior. And this painting got her into Syracuse University as an art painting major, where she graduated summa cum laude. So
What year was that?
What,
When she was a
painting?
junior,
Oh, well, that would have been 1944.
yeah.
And this, when I say change everything, this is one of the few tattered pictures we have of that event. You know, people came down from the Messenger and from all the newspapers and took pictures of her, you know, mock pictures of her painting this painting. But this gave her a reputation all through the area. I mean, here was this girl doing, now, think back 1944. People weren't doing this kind of stuff. And here it is, especially at this size, you know. So, she goes to Syracuse, graduates in 1949, and she's magna cum laude, comes back to Naples, and they offered her a teaching job at the Naples school. She lasted for 3 months, and then she quit. She said, I'm not a school teacher, I'm a painter, I can't stand these kids. And when you think about it, she never had brothers or sisters. She had no concept of family like that, and that's what, in the end, really hurt her. So she didn't want to deal with these kids. Anyway, there was a guy named Gould, George Gould, who was teaching in another school, came over, took that job, and she met him there at the school, and then they got married, and then he taught in Prattsburgh for 1 year, and then they all left and went to Greece, New York, where they lived on Ladder Road. But you can see the little Gould original. This little thing on the right is on a lot of her paintings. This painting here, which I have right here, so you can see the original one, this really opened things up for me in terms of some of her abilities. She is right here. She painted herself into the painting. But what makes this painting interesting is not just how well it's painted, you know, for this period of time. She changed the geography. She moved the mountains to the right so you could get a vision of down the valley. This is where we see that Jane is the artist. She's not just copying the space in front of her. She's composing the space in front of her to fit her painting. All these people who are in the painting are all listed on the back of the painting. So this painting is in Martha Kelly owns this painting. And if you go out 245 from Naples, you know how that road takes a swing and there's a farm right there? That's where she used to live. And that farm, by the way, has one of the oldest buildings in this area, and the old barn is one of the oldest buildings ever built. But so her family had this vineyard, and she populated the painting, which she often did with all the friends of Martha Kelly, and had them all out there collecting grapes, you know, and doing that. So it's really a sweet painting. But what I think it really does, she was a storyteller. And who was a storyteller on Saturday Evening Post magazines all through the 50s and 60s? Come on, you can do this. Norman Rockwell. She liked Norman Rockwell, and a lot of her paintings, as you can see up here, had that storytelling kind of background. And people commissioned her to do these kinds of paintings. Other paintings, Looking North, Cook's Point, it's owned by the Hawks. Now you can't see on this, but in the Cook's Point, his father on a tractor, the dog is in there, you know, all the various parts of his family there. It's kind of thing you would do, Daryl. You know, you would put all these people in, you know. And so I sort of took the term and took her landscapes, and I call her lakescapes, because she was really well known for paintings of the lake. And this is what she did. And these paintings are all about 32 by 40. They're good sized paintings. They're the classic over-the-couch painting. Now, the other kind of thing that is kind of interesting to know, I found in one of her paintings the price tag. And back then it was $300. Well, that's $3,000 to $4,000 today. So nobody was making $300 a week back then. So when you bought a painting for Jane, you paid for it, you know, as you would today, if you could find one. But you know, I should go back and just talk. This one here, which was, I've always had a hard time figuring out where she painted this from. Was she sitting on top of the school? Did she get a picture and work from there? But this was out of the blue. A guy contacted Historical Society. He bought this painting for $5 in a bin up in Rochester, and then saw that it was Jane Loomis, went to the Historical Society, somehow tracked down to me, sent me an email, and sent me a picture of the painting. I've gotten back to him 5 times, he never responded afterwards. I invited him down, I even offered to buy the painting from him if he wanted. And, but it's really a sweet painting, you know, it's kids all leaving school. And she must have done this when she was teaching at the school.
Glad to see him go.
Yeah. Probably.
Favorite time of day.
Look at this painting on the right. I mean, it's just luminous. You know, it seemed to me when I look at her paintings, her favorite time to paint was October. Because all of her paintings have that sort of red, orange, gold kind of feel, you know. It's a gorgeous painting. I mean, it's really a masterpiece for the time. And then right here left, Scribe's Glen, I brought that painting as well. These paintings here are owned by the Naples Library. Now, she became known as the portrait painter of choice. And this guy on the left is Judge Comey. Judge Comey had died. And usually, if you go to the courthouse, if you go to the courthouse, you'll see this whole room filled with people in black suits, you know, tight-tied and white beard, you know, and looking very judgy. And anyway, the Comey, he had died early, and you had to buy your own painting. If you wanted your painting in the courthouse, you had to hire the artist, get the painting, and pay for it out of your own pocket, because they didn't want any thought that the town or the city had bought your painting and put it on the wall, because you know that would be a conflict of maybe of interest. So she did this painting. Now what's interesting is this. It didn't take me any time to find it. Why? He's in a brown suit. You know, he's very casual. He's very relaxed. You go into that courthouse, you look, everybody's, you know, tight as a... There he is, just sort of hanging out, you know, like Uncle John, you know. And so there's this painting, and then on the right, I can't think of his name. Oh, Arthur Parker. He was the president of New York State Historical Society at the time. So these are 2 examples of local paintings that she did. And then she did another painting of the athletic director at the Canandaigua Academy. I don't have a picture of that one. And donated it, and there was a big article about it. And here's the article. Jane Loomis, Naples artist, paints Evans' portrait, gift of the class to CA. This happened all the time. She was in the press all the time. They loved to write about her. Painting wins recognition for Naples artists. And then over here, look at a bank was having an exhibition of her work. And they actually put an ad out. They actually did it right. You know, so Columbia, this was downtown in Rochester. So she was showing everywhere. And then she did children's portraits. Now, George Gould on the left was her adopted son. I asked Jennifer Gould, her adopted daughter, if there was a painting of her, and she said, there might be, but I have no idea where it is. And on the right is Katie Cox. So what she would do every fall, she would put an ad in the paper. Looking for the perfect Christmas gift? I'll do your kid's portrait, I'll do your kid's dog, I'll do any, you know, I'll do all greeting cards. She was doing all these little tasks, you know, paintings. And her 2 little dogs. Now, the dog on the right is Lucky. Now, what's cool about Lucky? Lucky was the school dog. He would hang out at the Naples Naples High School all the time, and the Linahans used to take care of it. And Linahan, at that time, was principal of the school. And the dog on the left was one of the Hawks dogs. There's probably 100 paintings like this out there, but nobody realizes they have them, you know. Now we get down to the part where, you know, what got me involved. Blanche put this out on the Naples Historical Site about this happening. I think that's how I found out about it. And by that time, I knew that Jane was my neighbor, but I had no idea what she had done outside that mural. So I saw this, and I said, holy crap, that's a good painting. You know, that's not just some Sunday painter. that is a well thought out painting. Not knowing at the time, it was a photograph that she repainted. So these are 40 by 60 black and white photos, and when Wagner got them done, he must have had a friend at Kodak, because you couldn't go to the local pharmacy and get a 40 by 60 photograph at the time. So he must have known somebody at Kodak, and he had all these paintings done, and then she would go in, and she colorized the brick. She put it in the sky. She put leaves on all the trees. You know, she would put things on, flowers on the plantings. In other words, she made it into a really beautiful thing. So she did a lot of these things. Overacker School. Now the Overacker School, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but that school, that painting ended up in the National Geographic magazine as an example of country schools. East Hill School. I don't know if that school still exists. Does anybody know?
Nope.
Okay. Foundation is the
Foundation.
Yeah.
See, I'm trying to get Rob here to write an essay on all these schools. He said, "Where do I start?" I said, you know, Rushville High School, you know, Middlesex Old Brick School. All of these are hand painted. Now, so all these things were done, and where do they? You know, and then they were donated back to the high school, and then the high school, after keeping him in the boiler room for about 20 years, said to the Middlesex Heritage, "Do you want them?" And they picked them up. Well, they were just covered in fly specks, dirt, dents, every kind of indignity that you could do to a photograph happened to them. I mean, you can just see they were just stacked up, you know, in a boiler room someplace. So I can't remember the guy's name.
Terry Albright.
Terry Albright. He's a really good archivist, and he went back in and fixed all of these paintings. And you just got a grant, right, to do the one on the left.
That's the final one for Rushville High School.
Yep.
They'll be done by the fall.
Yep. So that's being redone as we speak.
Excuse me, but when was the guy that contacted Gary Albright? He did the research on.
Well, it was a really good marriage
He's
between you and him,
a terrific man.
because you have now this incredible body of work that nobody else has, you know, and it really points to, you have all of her work in this photo mural project she did. There aren't any others. So it's a great collection, and we should exhibit it someplace, you know.
Well, we have 3 inside the town hall at
Yes.
Middlesex. The Rushville one's going to be in Rushville Town Hall, and the Grand Schoolhouse is in Potter Town Hall.
Now, most of you know this, but the Rushville Town Hall is the Loomis building,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's all related. So, not only is she a painter, but she was an illustrator. Ruby Freed on the left, and her house in Naples was just refurbished. And she was the one who made grape pies really popular in Naples. And she is a subject of a lot of Jane paintings. You'll see this painting on the right here. Oops, wrong painting. She's not in that one.
Yeah, she is.
The other one?
Oh yeah, she's standing there.
The big
Yeah.
one.
Then the things on the right are season greetings. She used to do cards for people. She did all kinds of things. You know, back then when you came out of art school in the 50s, you could paint signs. You had all these skills that most painters don't have today. Because, you know, that's what the curriculum was. So she did all of these things. These 2 illustrations that she did. They're really well done. You know, I mean, they're incredibly well done. And here again, they must have been for some story or some theme that either...
Those are by Fogarty.
You think so?
I know so.
Then I'm wrong. See, this is why I'm glad I'm doing this here.
What are they?
They're by Thomas Fogarty, who was also an illustrator for the Saturday Evening Post. He went to the Art Students League.
Okay.
They had a summer home here, and they...
That's what it was. I must have taken their picture at the same time and
Yeah,
not realized.
yeah.
Well, we'll just skip by this.
Sorry.
But they're really well done. I mean, so when I say Norman Rockwell period, here on the left, you know, Ruby's getting her hair done. On the right, she's pointing to the clock, it's time to go to bed. You know, you can almost see him in the Saturday Evening Post. You know, the kind of thing that would,
5 of 6.
Which is what he's reading. Which is
5
what he's
of
reading.
6 and the clock.
Yeah.
Time to go
Now,
down.
I don't know if these are the right titles, I just made them up.
Right.
Because I don't know, you know, but, and maybe on the back of them, it's written, we'll have to find that.
Yeah,
No?
I don't think they do. You can check.
I'll check
There
that
is
one,
a
yeah.
label.
Yeah. The other painting she did that's almost iconic is Booth Arnold's Tavern. And we were just talking about Booth Arnold's Tavern earlier tonight. And one of the cool things on this painting is on the back of it is a list of all the people who are sitting out there on the stoop.
My grandfather's standing on the left.
6? You can run, but you can't hide, I tell you. That's him standing on the left, huh?
That's- Yeah, yeah, very.
There it is, Stuart Mitchell, right here.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
There
now,
should be a, is there a?
I can read that thing.
Mary Jane.
Booth Arnold, Stuart Mitchell, Al Griswold, Frank Land, Ed Boyd, Cloyd Spider Comstock, and Carrie Dean, I can't read that. But this painting is hanging in the insurance company in Naples. Is that still Mitchell Insurance? What is it?
No.
That's
Joseph.
Joseph's
That's
Insurance.
Joseph.
Yeah, Ed Joseph has that painting hanging in it. It's right as you walk in the door, so you can see it right there on the wall. Arnold's Cafe is a great story for those, you know, it was a bar. Yeah, cafe, I think, is sort of a nice way of putting it. And upstairs was somewhat of a flop house. I mean, guys would come into town. Guys would come into town. They lived out 2 hours. You know, they come in on their buckboards, and they would come and they would go to Booth Arnold's on a Saturday night. You know, drink and if they didn't have a way to get home, they would sleep upstairs. If they did have a horse out front with a buckboard, he would just put him in the buckboard, hit the horse, and the horse would take him home. And it was like an Uber. Yeah. And I just love that story. You know, you can just see this horse showing up at some farmer's house. Yeah. Uh-oh.
It's all right.
Yeah.
No, it's not. All right. Gotta use my face again.
Yep. I don't know how you did it.
My face is hurting me, but it's killing me. That's what we're doing.
There you go. Next.
I gotta fix that.
That's it. So, Jane's finals days. She moved up, when she left next door to me, and she's only there for a couple of years, then she moved south of town on what they call Warren Hill. And Anna Warren was her neighbor and a relative, and Sally and Jason Warren lived next door to them, and she lived there by herself, and by this time she was totally estranged from her kids. You know, she did not have a successful motherhood. When she was asked to leave the premises in Greece by her husband, he basically told the kids, well, we'll never have to see her again. And she was asked to leave. And she didn't stay in touch. She just called them the kids. You know, she never called them by name. And lived up top of the hill. She continued to paint for a couple more years, but by the age of 49, she was done. She took all of her stuff and gave it to Anna Warren. We think that's when Parkinson's disease started coming into her life and she started to shake. And if you see her style of painting, you couldn't be shaking. You know, it just would be hard. So she lived up there, but she started a new project. Somebody got her involved in Kids Around the World project in a church out of Prattsburgh, Ingleside, the Ingleside Church. And so she adopted all these kids all over the world. And she supported these kids all over the world. So she would send them money every month. But the deal was this: if she didn't get a report back every month how the kids were doing, the money stopped. So she didn't want to be scammed, you know, even then. But she traveled all over the world to meet these kids. So this was her sort of perfect family for her. You know, she just paid for them. She visited them once every 2 years. And then she sent some of those kids to college. So she did this for a long time. So when she died in, say, 2000, of Parkinson's, heart attack took her away, but she had Parkinson's and pneumonia, and she died right there at Thompson Hospital. By that time, she was completely estranged from her kids. But she left behind a legacy, you know. Did I tell you when her father died, he left her $200,000? A lot of money back in that day. And so she never really had to go to work. Now she did paintings, you know, but she never had to have a job. And her husband paid alimony all those years. You know. And this is the last painting I'll show you. This is my favorite painting of Jane's. It's rock cut. It's a perfect painting to me because it's a painting of nothing but everything. You know, you have this beautiful line of the road going up through these two cliffs. You know, you have shadows, you have the coloration of the trees. The painting goes to the left, but it's balanced on the right. And if you go up there today, it hasn't changed one iota. So to me, I just think this is a nice way to end her career. You know, she just up and gone.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit about her. Now, how much time is it?
Good.
We good for time?
We're good for time.
I'll give you a 5-minute lecture on her sister. So she had a twin sister. She didn't know her twin sister until she was in her 30s. But her twin sister had none of the advantages Jane had. She was adopted by a couple in Manlius, and he was a railroad engineer. Her mother there was a housewife, you know, took care of her. She was the only child, although her stepfather had children from a previous marriage. They never really adopted her. They fostered her. This was a godsend. Why? Because I wanted to get their birth certificate. Couldn't get their birth certificate if she was adopted because it was a closed seal. But because she was fostered, I could get Betty's. Betty's is the same as Jane's. They're twins. So classic New York State sends me that, and with a letter saying, sorry, we couldn't provide the other one.
Close enough.
So Betty lived there, and she got involved with horses, and horses became a way of life. She bought and sold horses, and we have a couple newspaper clips where she was selling horses or selling, you know, stuff for horses. And she graduated from high school, and where she lived, she went right to work in a factory. Now, in 1946, this was not unknown. I mean, Jane was very fortunate that her parents said, yeah, there's only a war going on, go to Syracuse, major in painting, you know, you'll be fine. You know, Betty's parents, not so much. You know, she went to work, and she worked in one of the first, in Liverpool, where GE was starting to build up their huge building. And I actually went to that building a couple years ago and saw what was going on there. And it was just this massive building where they were building electronic parts. So she married a guy named Pringle. Now, Pringle, although she didn't know it at the time, had Huntington's disease. I don't know if you know Huntington's disease. It's awful. It's what Woody Guthrie died of. There's no cure. There's hardly any treatment. And if you have it, your son, it seems to travel from father to son, your son has a 50% chance of getting it. Well, so Pringle got it. They moved from Manlius to Medford, Oregon, where they lived. I can find no record that their son, who they had, Jay, ever went to school. I've called all the schools, I've called superintendents, and none of them could find anything about it. I think they just said he's going to die anyway, let him just stay home. And so what happened though, was when he was a senior in high school, this will give you the chills, he and a friend that he had met at the bus station, we used to hang out at the bus station in the coffee shop, decided they were going to go to LA, and they were going to just go to LA and see LA. So in April of the senior year, his mother gives him $600 they get in a car and they go to LA. They get in a squabble about money, you know, the other guy he went with had money in the game too, and they got in a squabble about money. They were in a motel room. Jay walks in with some guy named Greg. This is one of the 3 stories, and gathers his stuff, walks out of the door of the hotel, and has never been seen again. Disappeared. I spent months trying to find him, trying to find any, you know, if he had died of Huntington's, there would be a medical record. You know, if he had been murdered, you think there would have been a body, you know, someplace. We do not know what happened to him. I was stunned. I was saying, how can this happen? Until I realized there are 1,000 kids that go missing every year. So it's not as unusual as you think. So anyway, the other guy comes home, you know, thinking that Jay probably just took a bus home because he had money. Shows up at home, and the cops are all over him. And Betty took him to court, got her money back, and he told some 3 stories about how it all happened, and all 3 are conflicting in some way, and he's dead. And he died several years later. So, you know, we'll never know the true story. But it's all in here. I spent more time doing the Betty story than was ever made sense. Because it was just so bizarre that we could find nothing about her. And we have it all now. And I found a niece of Betty's, and she was very helpful. So there's the story. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to field them.
What was the Loomis family background? Where did that money come from?
The money came from James Loomis when he sold Glenn, when he sold his stepfather's farm out on Loomis Road. He had a farm out there. I don't know which one. I've never been able to find it, but I haven't really looked either. But somebody told me it's still standing. When he moved into Naples, the farmer sold. He had a what you might call a short leg, so he had like a build-up soul.
Yeah.
So I don't think he liked farm work, you know.
Yeah.
And so he sold the farm, made money, and bought the oil distribution, Van Dyne oil distribution. And from there, he had 3 gas stations. He owned the gas station right across from the Methodist Church on Main Street, and right behind the gas station was the house they lived in. And that's what. So when he died in Middlesex, by the way, he was driving through Middlesex, got in a car accident, and died here. His wife sold the house, moved next door to me, although I wasn't there yet, and then lived there for a number of years. And then Jane came in 1972. She moved in there as well. Now, what was cool about that house, and I never put 2 and 2 together until years later, that the first floor downstairs was a big rec room. So it was a perfect studio. You know, and it had a nice studio feel to it. You know, same as her house up on, same style of her house up on Warren Hill. Had a big cellar for a studio as well. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So as I
And
said,
they're
he did
connected.
well.
Yeah.
He did well. But it was after the war. Things were starting to hop along. You know, gas was hard to come by, and he had it. So, any other crazy questions? So the Loomis building is part of that family.
It is.
It's all
the
part of the
Rushville
same.
Loomis is
Yes,
part of
yes.
the family. Huh.
Understanding though, he's not a Loomis.
Well, that's true.
He is not a Loomis. He was adopted.
Yeah.
So, but his wife's sister, okay, was his mother. So her parents came from Otisco, New York, and that's how we think the connection was made, that they were born in Otisco. Somebody from the local church up there knew them here in Middlesex, said, why not? And that's how it all happened.
Did you say his wife's sister is his mother? Is that what you just said?
That's right, I heard
What, do you think this is a country song?
Wife's sister.
James Loomis's wife, all right, was the sister. Let me make sure I get this right. James Loomis' wife, and they adopted Jane. James and his wife adopted Jane, okay, but he died, and, I had this wrong, hold on, let me get it right. James's son Glenn was Glenn Loomis, that's what his name was, and he was the one who was adopted into the family. And he was adopted by his mother's sister. His mother's sister, I know, let me get this right. His mother's sister was how it all happened. In other words, she was what set this whole thing, yes, and it all happened. But you know, when you do these studies, you find this would happen all the time. People would die, and all the kids would just go to the neighbor's family.
Yep.
Anything else I can mumble for you? If anybody knows anything, in other words, if you know where the Loomis farm is, if anybody knows where that original farm is, and can take a picture of it, that would be great. Because all of this stuff will be residing, all the records will be residing in the Naples Historical Society and the Loomis file. So if we had a picture of the original house, that would be great. Okay.
Not many to choose from.
Book.
Ah! Book.
Go to Blanche.
Whole story. $20 in beautiful 4-color. I mean, we printed it really well. It's really well done. However, there's a mistake. Page 4 and 5 are interspersed. So if you buy it, I will get it fixed for you and bring it back to you. But there you have it. Blanche has 5 here for you. Thank you.